A change of plea expected any moment for Bryan Kohberger. I'm executive reporter Karen Lair, and you're watching Idaho News 6 Live. The man accused of stabbing 4 University of Idaho students expected to formally make a deal with prosecutors to avoid the death penalty himself. Bryan Kohberger expected to plead guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary in exchange for 4 life sentences and no opportunity to appeal. We'll hear those formal details in just a few minutes from inside court. We are standing by for that hearing to start any moment, and as soon as that stream begins, we will be listening in live to that courtroom with you and bring that to you here. First, we do have team coverage for you this morning. Our downtown Boise neighborhood reporter Riley Shoemaker is standing by inside that courtroom to bring us the very latest when the hearing wraps up, and our senior reporter Don Nelson is standing by outside the Ada County Courthouse. Our senior reporter Roland Barris is in Moscow, where these brutal murders happened more than 2.5 years ago. The defendant, Bryan Kohberger, is expected to appear in person today, along with many members of family of those victims: Ethan Chapin, Xander Kernodle, Kaylee Gonsalves, and Madison Mogan. As a reminder, Kohberger was set to stand trial beginning next month, in just about 6 weeks from now. What we know about this proposed plea deal so far is that it would spare Kohberger from the death penalty, but it also has to be done formally in court and in front of a judge, which is what we are expecting to see and hear any moment now. The families of the victims have had mixed reactions to the plea, ranging from outrage at the prosecution to relief that it is almost all over. I'm joined now by senior reporter Don Nelson, who, as we mentioned, is live outside the Ada County Courthouse as we anticipate this hearing to start any moment now. So, Don, tell us what you've seen out there and who you've already seen and spoken with going into the courthouse.
Thanks, Karen. A lot of people. Let's set the scene. I have never seen media presence so large, not only in front of the Ada County Courthouse, but in Boise in my 30-plus years at Idaho News 6. So, of course, we were here for Lori Vallow Daybell, Chad Daybell. Nothing like this. And these folks were out here. Everybody was out here early this morning anticipating to get the family members of the 4 slain college students coming into the courthouse. I will tell you this. When Steve Gonsalves showed up, it was almost like there was a rock star showing up. Everybody just gravitated toward him. He walked up to the courthouse and hugged and kissed his family. He did not go in. It seems that he said he's going to stay outside as a protest to this plea deal that was made with Kohberger's defense team. Steve Gonsalves walked right back down to the street where he had a brief press conference, and then he walked across the street, if you're familiar with Front Street, in front of the Ada County Courthouse over by Winco. I had the opportunity to chat with Steve as we walked down the sidewalk, and I think we have that sound right now if we can play that. Talk to us this afternoon. What time do you think you'll be able to talk to us?
Yeah, we'll probably be back in like an hour when the court starts, and then we can go out there and we'll deal with all this. If I just stayed right there.
I got you. How's the family holding up?
We're all disappointed. We're very disappointed. We worked too long, too hard for half-ass efforts.
Is that directed towards Judge Hitler?
Hitler hasn't done anything. He inherited this. Hopefully he can fix it. I'm not blaming nothing on Hitler. I'm putting this all on Thompson and Latour County. You know, they tore that house down. They've done everything to hide this. Why did this get done over the weekend? As soon as the investigation starts, they're cowards. They're running from it.
Yeah.
I'm not supporting them.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Steve. We got it.
There you have it, a very upset Steve Gonsalves, who's protesting what's happening today by not attending, but he did hug and kiss family members who did go inside. We're all anticipating what's going to be happening here outside the Ada County Courthouse, and as soon as we get more information, Karen, of course, we'll talk about it. Back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Don. Our crew has been out there all morning, and we also have video of some of the other family members making their way into the court. We've seen Ethan Chapin's family arriving at the courthouse and filing into that court building this morning. We've also seen members of the prosecution's team filing in and getting ready for what's expected to be a very big day for this high-profile case in Idaho. A lot of people are going to be watching the developments very closely. This is the video our team shot this morning where we can see Deputy Attorney General Jeff Nye, member of the prosecution's team, getting ready to share their side of this plea deal in front of Judge Stephen Hippler. So a big day for them, of course. And we also saw family members of Ethan Chapin who have been outspoken, actually quite quiet throughout the significant portion of these last couple of years, and recently just sitting down with ABC News to share their memories of Ethan. We'll hear from them in that interview in just a moment. Now, the prosecution claims they wanted to spare these families the pain of going to trial and seeing those crime scene photos as evidence. As we've mentioned, they've had split reactions. We heard from Steve Gonsalves, the father of victim Kaylee Gonsalves, who is very angry and upset about this plea deal. He said Idaho has failed. They failed me. They failed my whole family. They were outspoken, wanting to see this go to trial and wanting to see Bryan Kohberger face the death penalty. We've also heard from the aunt of Xander Kernodle, Kim Kernodle, who also wanted this to go to trial. She says they were not trying to spare us because they have already seen and heard a lot of these graphic details in the case. Ben Mogan, the father of Madison Mogan, is actually relieved. He says we can actually put this behind us and not have these future dates and future things that we don't want to have to be at, that we shouldn't have to be at, and that we have to do with this terrible person. He and his family will be speaking through their attorney after the hearing today, so we do expect to hear more from them today outside the Ada County Courthouse. And again, the parents of Ethan Chapin, mother Stacy, says they support this plea, and the Chapins will be in Boise, as we've already seen them showing up in support of this plea bargain, but they will not be participating in any media interviews. Now, one family that we haven't heard much from since this arrest is Bryan Kohberger's family, but they have broken their silence ahead of this hearing, releasing a statement last night through their attorneys saying, in light of recent developments, the Kohbergers are asking members of the media for privacy, respect, and responsible judgment during this time. We will continue to allow the legal process to unfold with respect to all parties and will not release any comments or take any questions. So we don't expect to see the Kohberger family there or hear from them. They do want privacy during this time, but we, of course, will keep you posted if we see or hear any sign of them being at this hearing in Boise. Now, we do have some sound bites to share with you from some of the family members leading up to this hearing, and Steve Gonsalves from this morning.
This isn't what we should be doing. You don't deal with terrorists, and you don't deal with people who kill your kids in their sleep. So, we'll never see this as justice. I'm not liking the fact that there's no guarantee here that this individual is going to share details. He's going to take complete ownership of what he did.
Now, there is still a lot up to decide today. We are expecting to hear the prosecution and the defense discuss this plea deal. Just so you know, we are watching this stream very closely, and we'll bring it to you as soon as it begins. But so far, they have not put up those cameras. And what's going to be different about this case, or this hearing today, compared to the previous hearings that we've had inside the Ada County Courthouse, is that the judge, Stephen Hippler, in this case, did approve of a pool photographer to be in the courtroom today. So in addition to that split box of multiple cameras that the court provides that we have been used to seeing for these hearings, we will be getting high quality photos from within the courtroom today that we will be able to share with you on air as soon as we get them from the photographer inside that courtroom. Now, as far as these victims go, Ethan Chapin was a triplet with his siblings Hunter and Maisie all attending the University of Idaho together. Hunter and Maisie and their parents, Jim and Stacy, sat down with Good Morning America's Kana Whitworth to share Ethan's story and their recounts of the events. Now, the night before Ethan was killed, Maisie brought him to her sorority formal. She now cherishes the text that he sent her right before bed.
So he started off by texting me. I think he said, "Dog, come hang out. We all want you here." And I said, "I'm going to bed." And then he said, "Love you." And I didn't even respond to that. I think I was asleep by then.
And the "I love you" kind of stood out, though.
Well, yeah, definitely.
Now, Hunter, who pledged Sigma Chi with Ethan, says the next morning a friend at the fraternity woke him up saying the police were at Xana's house.
Hunter Johnson came up to me and said, I was like, where's Ethan and Xana? And he's like, they're not here anymore. So like, what do you mean they're not here anymore? He's like, I think they were murdered last night.
I miss him every day. When you lose your son at 20, you know, it's different. It's a different loss. And I miss him every single day. And I always will.
Family shifting now to Ethan's legacy, getting tattoos to honor him.
We all benefited from having Ethan in our lives for 20 years. It's a tremendous loss.
Now, we do also have our senior reporter, Roland Barris, standing by live for us in Moscow, Idaho. Obviously, the small, tight-knit college community where this crime took place more than 2.5 years ago now. As we reported at the time, there was an extensive period between the crime itself and the arrest where it was about 6 weeks where students were on edge. There were people very scared to be walking around on campus. A lot has changed since then. Roland, what are you hearing now from the people who live in this community still?
Well, Karen, first of all, let me tell you that we're here at the Vandal Healing Garden and Memorial, and this is something that personally I think every college campus should have. Hopefully not every campus deals with this type of situation, but it is a place where you can come and reflect and remember and place flowers, and we should show you around here. This was dedicated last year, and it's just an amazing thing. And you can see you can light these electric candles, you can leave messages, you can leave flowers, people leave rocks and stones because that is traditionally known as a means of respect and remembrance. And it's just an unbelievable structure that they managed to put up very quickly, which gives you some idea of just how much impact this whole situation, this whole case had on this community. A lot of times to put something like this up might take some time, maybe years. In this case, very quickly this was put up, and obviously because of this case. Now, I have talked with some people in town over the last 24 hours to get their impressions on what's going on with this plea deal. And what they've told me is, like everyone, they have a variety of opinions. But there was one gentleman I talked to who said he really wanted this to go to trial. He really wanted to hear the details. He's not certain of that this is an open and shut case and that there might be other people, who knows, that were involved. He just was kind of saying, look, this is something that I would have really liked to have seen more details on, and that would have been provided in court. That is not going to happen, it appears, although things could change, but it appears that it won't go that way. And so there are going to be questions in a lot of people's minds here. I know there's a lot of people in this community who want this just done too, and we talked to those people as well. They want it over with. They want to move on with their lives. But there will always be, I think, for some people, a little bit of a question that they didn't really get to see everything. They didn't get to see all the details, and that maybe, you know, as it always goes with the internet these days and everything, that maybe something was swept under the carpet. Not saying that they're right in any of that, but that is the way things go in this day and age. So, you know, we are here again at the memorial, and we should show you, I think, that this really was started because of this case. And you can see the names prominently portrayed here at the memorial. Xana, you've got Maddie Mae. They're all right front and center on this memorial, where people can come and sit and reflect. There are flowers, there are candles down below. Kaylee Consalvis and Ethan Chapin. And today there are not many people here. It is summertime, of course. Excuse me. But there may be later today. Obviously, this is a place that is that people come on a regular basis. It's just a beautiful location to sit and reflect. It's a little hot out today too, but we expect to see some people here later today, most likely, and we'll of course be respectful. If they do show up, we will give them their space because this is as close as it gets to, an area that you want to give absolute privacy to as people deal with their grief. And you can see what they've put in the center here, a beautiful sculpture that is blown by the wind and moves with the wind. And it's just an incredible tribute to those who have been lost, not just in this case, in this terrible murder case, but anyone else that has lost someone who goes to the University of Idaho can come here and they can sit and reflect and leave flowers or stones, notes, and hopefully begin the healing process, because that's all we have left at this point with this particular case, is to try and heal and move forward. And again, a lot of people in this community are hoping to start that process sooner rather than later. Karen, back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Roland. A nice place in the community, as many people have been impacted by this high-profile case. For those of you just joining us now, we want you to know that we are very closely monitoring that live stream from within the Ada County courtroom, where we expect to see Bryan Kohberger and Judge Stephen Hippler, and both defense and prosecution, take their seats for what we are expecting is a change of plea hearing that was set to start at 11 o'clock. We want you to know it seems they are running a little bit late inside the courtroom. They've not yet been seated, but as soon as they begin proceedings inside the courtroom, we will bring that to you live right here on Idaho News 6, so stick with us. They are just now, I'm being told, allowing the reporters into the room to get their seats, and usually things will get moving pretty quickly after that. Now, we know that this was kind of a last-minute hearing. The court itself was not even prepared yet. There was a lottery system in place for courtroom seating for the trial that was set to start in 6 weeks, but they didn't even have that system up and running before today's hearing. So this was a first come, first served basis, with a lot of people lining up outside of the courthouse this morning. I do think we have some video that we can show you with crowds lining up. We have national media from all across the country setting up outside of the Ada County courthouse in downtown Boise. We have members of the public from across the country who have traveled hearing and be part of it in person. This is a live look right now at a lot of those media crews set up outside, including some of our very own team outside getting ready to hear from lawyers and families of victims after the hearing if they choose to address the media. We do hope to hear from at least some of those family members and their reactions to what we are expecting is a change of plea for Bryan Kohberger in this very high-profile quadruple murder case. Now, as we mentioned, in the 11th hour, the Gonsalves family made a plea to Judge Stephen Hippler in this case. This is a look at some of those comments. Now, he was calling out Thompson, referencing Latah County prosecutor Bill Thompson, robbed us of our day in court, he says. No negotiations, no jury of our peers, not even the pretense of cooperation and fairness. He didn't have the basic decency, the plain human courage to face the families, to meet our eyes and ask, how do we make an offer that works? Judge Stephen Hippler, you are the only hope that our child murderer isn't granted control over his destiny and our children's names. You take control of this deal and make it, because now you own it. So you can hear from Steve Gonsalves here.
Do you think there's a chance the judge will reject this plea deal?
No, I don't think so.
So you're not holding out hope still?
We didn't agree on it. He only negotiated with the murderer of our children. I was the only person that he negotiated. He didn't give us the courtesy to negotiate with us, to even pretend. He could have just pretended and then lied, but he didn't even pretend. He basically said, your guys' input isn't needed.
All right, and now we are going to take you in live, as promised, to listen in to that courtroom hearing right now for Bryan Kohberger's case.
All right, this is CR 0124316665. Defendant is present in custody with counsel, Ms. Thompson, Ms. Jennings, and Ms. Taylor, Ms. Massoff, and Ms. Barlow. The state's present with Mr. Thompson, Mr. Horowitz, Ms. Jennings, and Mr. Nye is here as well. Am I miss anybody? I'm sorry.
Ms. Allen is here as well.
Ms. Allen is here as well. Very well, thank you. All right, we are here today to entertain a change of plea. Before I start, I want to address some issues of concern and otherwise. First, I appreciate everybody in attendance today being on their best behavior. Please, no outbursts or demonstrations. Any such conduct will result in immediate removal and may result in an inability to attend further court proceedings in this case. I want to point out that there have been calls by some for the public to contact me and my office in an attempt to influence my decision-making in this case. This has been extraordinarily disruptive for court staff and the ability for them to get work done, not only in this case, but in other cases where defendants are entitled to have their cases processed, and frankly, as important, if not more so, for victims to have their cases processed in those cases. It's also highly inappropriate. A court is not supposed to, and this court will never, take into account public sentiment in making an opinion regarding its judicial decisions in cases. Courts should, and I always will, make decisions based on where the facts and the law lead me, period. I have not read any of the numerous messages nor listened to any of the numerous voicemails that have been sent to me and my staff. Those have all been forwarded to security and, where appropriate, to law enforcement. I ask that you not continue to mount such campaigns or to send me information like this because, again, it is not appropriate and, frankly, not something I would take into account when deciding a matter in a case like this. I also want people to understand some very basic concepts about the ideas of separation of powers and what the court's duties are and what the duties and the rights of the executive, or in this case, the prosecuting attorney, is. The executive, the elected prosecutor, is the sole authority in deciding what charges to pursue, including whether, as well as what penalties to ask for, and what penalties to pursue, including the death penalty. This court cannot require the prosecutor to seek the death penalty, nor would it be appropriate for this court to attempt to do that. This court, in considering a plea agreement, if it were to reject this plea agreement, cannot force the state to seek the death penalty. My role and power in considering a plea agreement is extremely limited. My role is to ensure that the defendant's plea is given freely, voluntarily, and intelligently. If those things are met, I can only reject a plea, such as the one in this case, where I'm not being asked to agree to the sentence in advance. I can only reject it, for example, if the defendant does not meet or admit to all of the elements of the crime. That is, I can ensure what is called a factual basis to the plea. Finally, I want to offer my apologies to all the families, including the victims' families, the families of the defendant, for the short notice for today's hearing, and I'm sure what must have been the hurried efforts to get here. I, like most everyone else, learned of this plea agreement Monday afternoon and had no inkling of it beforehand. Prior to that time, I was under the belief that this case was proceeding to trial, as had been indicated, and my staff and I were busy continuing to work on preparations to have potentially 10,000 citizens of Ada County come to jury duty starting in mid-July, with the questionnaire process in mid-July. It was, once I learned of the defendant's decision to change his plea in this case, it was important that I take the plea as soon as possible because of the extraordinary administrative efforts that were otherwise attendant to the process of this, getting this trial potentially underway on time, and including the significant process of bringing, again, potentially up to 10,000 jurors to come in and fill out juror questionnaires prior to the beginning of the voir dire process. And so it was important that we, if we're going to go down this road, do so expeditiously so that we can avoid those costs and expenses associated with that. Otherwise, if it was not going to result in a plea, or if for some reason the plea were to fall through today, that we could continue diligently towards trial at the time specified. And so that obviously required that we act quickly. And so some folks may have not had the amount of time that we would otherwise allow for them to travel here. And so, again, I apologize for that. I want to make people aware that during the hearing, if you are to leave the courtroom for any reason, you will not be readmitted during the hearing. Also, when we finish the hearing this morning, I ask that the public and media wait in their seats until the victims' families and the defendants' families and others are escorted out of the courtroom before you start to leave. Finally, I want to acknowledge the trial court administrator and her staff, the Ada County Sheriff, and the Ada County 4th District Marshal Service for the huge lift that they've accomplished in preparing for and orchestrating this hearing today, as well as to all the security attendant today that you see, and some of whom many of whom you don't see, with less than 48 hours notice. And so I appreciate the hard work that they've been doing. Frankly, some of them while they were on some vacation prior to the trial starting and had to call that short. And so I appreciate very much their professionalism and dedication. All right. That said, let's move to the business of today. I understand the state and the defense have reached a plea agreement in this case. For the record, I have a written plea agreement which indicates in sum the defendant will plead guilty to all 5 counts in the indictment, burglary, felony, and first-degree murder, 4 counts. The state and the defendant stipulate, that is, that the defense is not free to argue for a lesser sentence at sentencing to the following. The defendant on the burglary charge will be sentenced to 10 years fixed, and that the defendant on counts 2 through 5, the 4 counts of first-degree homicide, on each count would receive a fixed life sentence, all 5 of those counts to run consecutive to one another. Defendant, as part of the plea agreement, waives his right to appeal, as well as his right to appeal the sentence and his right to seek leniency or reconsideration of the sentence under Idaho Criminal Rule 35. This is not a Rule 11 agreement. meaning the court is not bound by the plea agreement and could impose a different lawful sentence at sentencing. The stipulated agreement between the parties is the maximum on each count. So theoretically, the only thing the court could do would be a lesser sentence at sentencing. But the defendant is not free to ask the court to do so under the plea agreement. Are there any other material terms of the plea agreement that the parties would like to make? Obviously, the plea agreement, the written plea agreement will speak for itself and be part of the court record.
Not from the state, Your Honor. Thank you.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, very well. All right. Ms. Taylor, have you had sufficient time to discuss this case and all of its ramifications with your client?
I have, Your Honor.
Have you discussed fully with him his rights, defenses, and possible consequences to him of the guilty plea?
Yes, Your Honor.
Have you been able to do all the discovery you feel necessary?
Yes, Your Honor.
And have you informed your client of the importance of providing the court truthful and accurate answers in taking this plea today?
I have.
Have you apprised your client of any and all offers and counteroffers and answered his questions about those?
Yes.
Do you consent to the entry of the plea today?
I do.
All right, Mr. Kohberger, I need to ask you some questions this afternoon, or I guess it's this morning still. I do this to ensure that so that I am assured that you understand the nature of the charges to which I understand you're going to plead guilty, as well as the possible consequences to you of your guilty pleas. I want to make sure your plea is given voluntarily, and I want to make sure that you actually committed the crimes to which you're pleading guilty, because I don't want you to plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit. If you attempt to plead guilty today, but for some reason I don't accept your plea, then it is possible that your statements today could be used against you later at trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And now while you're standing, actually, why don't you take the oath from the clerk?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in the matter not given before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, and Mr. Kohberger, just to make it easier, you don't need to stand when you speak to me. I appreciate the sign of respect, but for convenience, you can remain seated, all right? Before I start asking you questions today, have you consumed substantive questions? Let me ask you, have you consumed any alcohol, drug, or other intoxicating substance that would impair your ability to understand or exercise reasonable judgment?
No.
You feel like you are thinking clearly today?
Yes.
All right, I want you to understand what the possible penalties are for each of the crimes to which I understand you're going to offer a guilty plea today. They include on count one, the burglary, a fine of up to $50,000 and a period of incarceration of up to 10 years in the state penitentiary. You may be required to pay restitution to any victims of the crime. Count 2, 3, 4, and 5 for first-degree murder. The consequences include a fine of up to $50,000, a period of incarceration of life imprisonment, which is a requirement of a sentence, that it be a life sentence with a mandatory minimum sentence of at least 10 years on each of those counts. In addition, you would be potentially responsible for a fine of up to $5,000 to each of the victims of your crime to be enforced in the form of a civil judgment to operate as additional punishment. This is in excess of any restitution or fines that the court could order. And again, you may be required to pay restitution to the victims of the crime. You would be required to provide, as to counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, a DNA sample and a right thumbprint impression, and potentially pay for analysis of those samples. You would lose any right to possess, purchase, or carry a firearm, the right to serve on jury duty, the right to hold public office, and the right to vote. Do you understand the charges and all those possible consequences?
Yes.
You've heard the plea agreement that I talked about today. Do you agree with that plea agreement?
Yes.
And do you understand the nature of the charges that are that you've been charged with that I understand you're going to plead guilty today to?
Yes.
As I indicated, I'm not bound by the plea agreement, but the plea agreement is for the maximum on each count. Do you understand that I'm not bound by the plea agreement?
Yes.
Has anyone promised you that I would be lenient or easy on you if you pled guilty?
No.
Has anyone threatened you or anyone close to you to get you to plead guilty?
No.
Has anyone, other than the state's agreements with respect to the plea agreement, has anyone promised you anything in exchange for your plea agreement?
No.
Has anyone told you to be untruthful in answering my questions today?
No.
Has anyone offered you a reward of any kind other than the plea agreement in order to get you to plead guilty today?
No.
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes.
And counsel, obviously there have been a number of motions filed to suppress evidence in this case. Other than those filed, are there any other motions that you felt were available with respect to Rule 12?
No, Your Honor.
And Mr. Kohberger, you understand that by entering the guilty plea in this case, you would be giving up your right to appeal any decision this court made, as well as your sentence?
Yes.
Have you had enough time to decide whether or not to plead guilty?
Yes.
Are you pleading guilty freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
Given your choices, do you believe it's in your best interest to plead guilty?
Yes.
Have you discussed fully the matter of pleading guilty with your attorney, and are you satisfied with the advice you've received?
Yes.
Has your attorney advised you to your satisfaction about what your rights are, what your defenses may be, and what the possible consequences to you of your guilty plea are?
Yes.
Has your attorney done everything you've asked them to do?
Yes.
Are you satisfied with their representation of you?
Yes.
I have received a written guilty plea advisory questionnaire that is purported to be filled out by you. Did you fill that document out?
Yes.
Did you understand the questions that you answered in this document?
Yes.
And are the answers that are outlined in this document your answers?
Yes.
Are those answers truthful?
Yes.
Did you sign the document?
Yes.
And this document outlines many of the rights that you have in this case should you not plead guilty. Did you understand those rights?
Yes.
They include a right to a jury trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
They include a right to the presumption of innocence. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You have the right to require the state to prove your guilt as to each element beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you understand that?
Yes.
They include a right to confront your accusers and cross-examine witnesses presented by the state, including by utilizing the subpoena power of the court to accomplish that. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You understand you would have a privilege against self-incrimination and a right to remain silent, meaning you would not be compelled to testify if you did not wish to, had you not pled guilty.
Yes.
You understand you're giving up that privilege and those rights that I've just outlined by pleading guilty.
Yes.
All right, I want you to understand what the state would have had to have proven at trial had you, as to the crimes that you're pleading guilty to, had you, if you didn't plead guilty. Let me find the document. Hang on a second here. All right. So as to count one burglary, the state would have to have proven that on or about November 13, 2022 in Latah County, Idaho, you unlawfully entered a residence located at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder. As to count two, the state would have had to have proven that on or about that same date in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being, by stabbing Madison Mogen, from which she died. As to count three, the state would have had to have proven that on that same date in Latah County, at that same address, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being, by stabbing her, from which she died. As to count four, the state would have had to have proven that on or about that same date in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being, by stabbing her, from which she died. And then as to count five, also murder in the first degree, that on or about November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being, by stabbing him, from which he died. Do you understand those things the state would have had to have proven?
Yes.
And do you understand that by pleading guilty, the state no longer has to prove those things because you're admitting those things are true?
Yes.
I want to also make, for the record, the defendant has provided with the guilty plea advisory form a document entitled Written Factual Basis that purports to have the defendant's signature dated 1 July 2025. Did you sign that document?
Yes.
And did you agree with the written factual basis that is included there?
Yes.
And then let me ask you, did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
I would ask the state at this time to provide its recitation of its factual basis had this case gone to trial.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the organization of the recitation is different than what I think the court and the public may be familiar with from the probable cause affidavit and other documents. The state's evidence, as an overview, would show that back in March of 2022, when the defendant was residing at his parents' residence or was residing back in Pennsylvania, his home state, he purchased online a K-bar knife and sheath with an Amazon gift card that he had purchased shortly prior to the purchase of the knife, sheath, and sharpener. Jumping ahead, the end of June of that year, The defendant, Mr. Kohberger, moved from Pennsylvania to Pullman, Washington, which is right across the state line from Moscow, Idaho, for the purpose of pursuing a PhD in criminal justice at Washington State University. The state's evidence would indicate that beginning July 9th of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone began connecting to a cell tower that serves the area of the 1122 King Road residence in Moscow, Idaho. Now, I will acknowledge for the court and all present that there are many residences in that area. It's a dense population of mostly college-related occupants. Between July 9th of 2022 and November 7th, the defendant's phone connected to that particular tower during late night, early morning hours, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., on approximately 23 times. Now, I will acknowledge also, we do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with residents of 1122, but we can put his phone in that area on those times. In the interim, on August 22nd of 2022, Lake Tahoe County Sheriff's Deputy Darren Duke conducted a traffic stop in the early morning hour or late evening hours, about 11 p.m. On the west side of Moscow, on the Moscow-Pullman Road. This was a traffic stop of Mr. Kohberger's car, which turned out to be a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra with Pennsylvania plates. During the course of the traffic stop, Deputy Duke was able to obtain Mr. Kohberger's name, Bryan Kohberger, his phone number, and his address, which at that point was an apartment address in Pullman. We then move to the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. The state's evidence would show that early morning hours on that day, Mr. Kohberger's phone left his Pullman residence, which is an apartment in kind of the central northwest part of Pullman. That phone was then subsequently turned off at approximately 2:54 a.m. and remained off until approximately 4:48 a.m. on Sunday, the 13th of November. The state's evidence would include a trial, video surveillance of a business on the Moscow-Pullman Highway, just across the state line from Moscow. It would show a vehicle matching the description of the defendant's Hyundai Elantra entering Moscow at approximately 3:02 a.m. Compiled surveillance that the investigators put together from businesses and residents then show the defendant's car, the white Elantra, as I've described, circling the 1122 King Road area, that neighborhood, starting around 3:30 or so in the morning. Comes into the immediate area of 1122 King Road, which is actually on a dead end, and then leaves several times. And approximately 4:05 that morning, the defense car had entered that area, was leaving, stopped at the intersection of King and Queen Road, did a U-turn, and the state's evidence would show that the defendant's car came back and parked behind and above the 1122 King Road residence. The state believes that its evidence would then show that the defendant entered the residence of 1122 through the kitchen sliding door on the back side of the residence, which is the side of the residence that would face the area above where the defendant's car was parked. The defendant entered the residence, went to the third floor, and with a knife, killed Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonzalez. The defendant, as he left that room, for whatever reason, ended up leaving, or the sheath for a K-bar knife was left on the bed next to Madison Mogan's body. And I can jump ahead. That sheath was tested by the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab, and single source male DNA was found on the snap of that sheath, as well as blood from both Kaylee and Madison and other trace evidence. But it's important to note single source male DNA was on the snap of that sheath. The state's evidence would show that Xana Knodel was still awake at this time. In fact, had taken a DoorDash order not long before this started. Her room was not on the third floor, it was on the second floor on the west side. As the defendant was either coming down the stairs or leaving, he encountered Xana, and he ended up killing her, also with a large knife. Ethan Chapin, Xana's boyfriend, was asleep in their bedroom, in her bedroom, and the defendant killed him as well with a large fixed blade knife. Each victim suffered multiple wounds. I will state for the record that there is no evidence there was any sexual component or sexual assault on any of the victims. I want to make that clear so there's no speculation. There were 2 other roommates in the house, and they were already asleep. During the course of this, one of those roommates awoke, looked out her door not knowing what was going on, and saw the defendant, who was dressed in black with a black balaclava on, holding some sort of container in his hand. And she saw him leave the house through the direction of the kitchen to where that sliding door is that I mentioned before. At approximately 4:20 that morning, so this would have been 15 minutes or so later, the defendant's car is seen on a surveillance camera for 1112 King Road, which is immediately next door to the west of 1122, leaving the area at a high rate of speed. And if the court were to see that, or anybody in this courtroom would see that, you can see the car almost loses control as it makes the corner, heads north, and then turns to go south on Walenta, which is one of the only ways to get out of that part of town. The evidence would show that following that, the defendant in his Elantra drove south of Moscow. We know that he drove on the back roads because there are surveillance cameras on the main highways, Highway 95, that would have picked up the defendant's car if he'd gone that route. And they did not show the defendant's car on that route during the time. So we know that he went through a variety of back roads in very rural, isolated part of Latah County. About 4:48 that morning, the defendant's phone comes back on. And the evidence will show that that phone was located south of Moscow, likely at a side road intersection with Highway 95. From there, the defendant's phone activity tracks it heading back north towards Pullman, Washington, where the defendant lived. About 5:26, starting approximately 5:26, various surveillance cameras in Pullman, Washington pick up the defendant's vehicle as he enters Pullman from the south and heads north and slightly west towards his apartment, where he arrived at approximately 5:30 in the morning. Later that morning, Sunday, the 13th of November of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone returned to the area of King Road. We don't know exactly what he did, but it returned to that area. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. He was there for about 10 minutes and then returned to his Pullman residence. About 9:30, the state's evidence will show, evidence taken from the defendant's phone, that he took a selfie of himself on his phone in what appears to be the bathroom of his Pullman apartment with a thumbs up. The defendant's phone then went to the Lewiston-Clarkston Valley, approximately 30 miles south of Moscow and Pullman. And the defendant is actually seen with his car at various businesses down there. This area is the confluence of the Clearwater River and the Snake River. Lewiston is Idaho's seaport. Large bodies of moving water down there. In addition to tracing the defendant's activities, as I've just outlined, on the 13th and leading up to the 13th, the state's evidence will show that following Sunday, November 13th of 2022, business records show that the defendant began searching for a K-bar knife and a K-bar knife sheath, as the state believes, to replace the one that was left at the scene of the murders. The evidence also will suggest that there were at least attempts by the defendant to delete or alter his purchase history on Amazon, where all these transactions had occurred. Later that week, the state's evidence will show that Mr. Kohberger went to what we would call DMV, motor vehicle licensing here in Idaho, in Pullman, to change his car registration from Pennsylvania to Washington. That's of note because Pennsylvania cars do not require a front license plate. The vehicles seen on the surveillance cameras of the defendant's car showed it didn't have a front license plate on it. At the time of the traffic stop by Deputy Duke in August, it was Pennsylvania plate, no front license plate. Mr. Kohberger proceeded to finish his semester of studies at Washington State University and returned to Pennsylvania for the holidays. Law enforcement at this point were aware of Mr. Kohberger, had been accessing information about him, were trying to find him. They located him in Pennsylvania, and they conducted what's called a trash pull. During the nighttime hours, agents of the FBI, who assisted immensely with this case, working with the sanitation department back in this neighborhood in Pennsylvania, took trash that had been set out on the street for collection, sent the contents of that from the Pennsylvania residence of the defendant's parents to the Idaho State Forensic Laboratory, where the lab experts there were able to identify DNA on a Q-tip as coming from the father of the person whose DNA was found on the knife sheath that was next to Madison Mogen's body in the bed. Subsequently, an arrest warrant was issued here in Idaho, and a search warrant was issued in the state of Pennsylvania with the assistance not only of the FBI, but the Pennsylvania State Police. Mr. Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home to return to Idaho. Upon his return to Idaho, a DNA sample was taken from him, and it matched the DNA found on the knife sheath next to Maddie's body at the crime scene. I can tell the court, in public, the weapon itself, the knife, has not yet been recovered. I can tell the court that the defendant's apartment in Pullman was searched, as well as his office. Spartan would be a kind characterization. There was virtually nothing there. Nothing of evidentiary value was found. And of course, we are now talking 6-8 weeks after the time of the killings. In Pennsylvania, the defendant's car was seized, and it was actually pretty much disassembled internally. And it also had been cleaned. There was a bucket of cleaner right beside it. I think we can all look to our own cars, you know, and those compartments in the doors. We try to keep them clean where you put stuff. There's always some degree of crud in there. They were spotless. The defendant's car had been meticulously cleaned inside. And the state would present to the jury that that was part of the defendant's plan in covering up this. The defendant has studied crime. In fact, he did a detailed paper on crime scene processing when he was working on his pre-doctorate degrees, and he had that knowledge and skill. So, Your Honor, at the end, the state submits that the evidence that I've given just a quick overview of, and that to present in court would consume weeks, which the state is prepared to do and has been prepared to do, would show that as the defendant has just admitted and pleaded guilty on November 13th, 2022, Mr. Kohberger entered the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. He did that with the intent to kill. We will not represent that he intended to commit all of the murders that he did that night, but we know that that is what resulted, and that he then killed intentionally, willfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice forethought, Maddie Mogen, Kaylee Gonzalez, Ethan Chapin, and Santa Cruz. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, based on the state's proffer and importantly based upon defendant's explicit admission to committing these crimes, the court finds there is a factual basis. Therefore, with respect to count 1, burglary, felony, how do you plead, Mr. Kohberger, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 2, murder in the first degree, as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogen, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 3, as it relates to murder in the first degree for the murder of Kaylee Gonzalez, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 4, the first-degree murder of Xana Kernodle, a human being. How do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 5, the first-degree murder of Ethan Chapin, a human being. How do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Right. The court will find that the defendant understands the nature of the charges and each offense and the possible consequences to him of his guilty plea. The court finds that there is a factual basis for the plea and that finds the defendant believes the plea to be in his best interest. I find that the plea was given freely, voluntarily, and was intelligently made. I accept the plea. I direct that it be entered. I'll continue the matter for sentencing in this case. I think it was mentioned on the call Monday afternoon the defense wishes to waive a pretrial investigation. Is that accurate?
Yes, Your Honor.
The state also?
Yes, Your Honor. The state does not believe pre-sentence investigation is needed given the evidence that is available. We want to, though, make sure that all of the victims have the opportunity to make statements to the court at sentencing.
Absolutely. And certainly both the state and the defense may present whatever sentencing memorandum and other documents you wish me to consider. The victims will be given an opportunity to provide the statements that they wish to at sentencing. Do we need more than 1 full day for sentencing?
I do not believe so, Your Honor. Obviously, we have numerous victims, and we have victims who share unique perspectives on this, and we want to make sure that they all have time to express their feelings to the court. But I believe that if we can start perhaps 8:30 or so in the morning, that we should be able to complete it all in 1 day.
Defense agree with that in terms of the time frame?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. So as it happens, we have some time reserved in this case in July and August. The week of July 22nd is available. I don't know if that's too soon for the parties, or the next week, the week of August 4, is available. Any preference?
Your Honor, we're prepared as soon as the court wants to schedule it.
The state, I believe, would be prepared on the 22nd. Right. We've told the victims' families that we're looking at approximately those dates.
All right. So because of the plan to bring in so many jurors to fill out questionnaires, I had ordered that no other trials could take place in this courthouse the week of July 22nd. And so we will use that in terms of the sentencing date because of what I'm sure will be the significant interest of the media and the public and the logistics that will be required to make that happen. Without trials going, it'll be a lot easier to do that. So let's pick that week. Why don't we pick July 23rd with the idea that if for some reason we don't finish, we could continue into the 24th. And we'll start at 9 in the morning. So, does that give your team enough time, Sandra? 9 in the morning? All right. Any concerns with that date?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
No, sir.
All right. Any reason why I should not rescind the non-dissemination order at this time?
You're right. I think that given the history of this case, it would be best if that remained in place through sentencing. So we have time to make sure there's the ability to completely answer questions. That would be the state's preference and recommendation.
We'd have no objection for the order to remain in place through sentencing.
All right, I will, at this point, the idea to keep it until sentencing, which time it would be withdrawn in order to give the parties the space and time to prepare to meet what I'm sure will be the deluge of media requests. That's at least my preliminary decision at this point. We can always revisit if it seems to be, for some reason, I should. That said, obviously, I don't think the defendant, a bond was ever set for the defendant. Were it would be revoked. The prior order allowing him to come in civilian clothes is revoked given his plea and no longer the presumption of innocence, and in fact now the actual conviction for the crimes. He will continue to be held at the jail pending sentencing. Is there anything else today?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
I assume that the trial date will be vacated and those 4 jurors will be released.
The trial will be vacated, and I'm sure that the jury commissioner will get word to those that receive their summons that they won't be required to attend. So that said, again, if you would all please wait for the parties and the victims' families and others to leave the courtroom before you do, I would appreciate it. And with that, we're adjourned. All right, please.
All right, and that was the live courtroom feed. Breaking news here on Idaho News 6 as defendant Bryan Kohberger, charged with those 4 murders of University of Idaho students in 2022, now admits guilt and tells the country that he was responsible for those crimes. Now, this was a proceeding that was even unexpected for the judge, as we heard. It was just last week that they released a new timeline for this case where we expected those opening statements to begin on August 18th. This also caught the judge, Stephen Hippler, off guard as he just learned of this agreement on Monday, just like we did. I want to show you and recap those guilty pleas that are now official for the case of Bryan Kohberger. He admits guilt to first-degree burglary and 4 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. One by one, he admitted and told the judge, I did this. They asked him very specifically, I do not want you to admit to a crime you did not commit, and asked him very specifically, are you pleading guilty because you are guilty? And Bryan Kohberger, we heard him speak in the courtroom and tell Judge Stephen Hippler, yes. So we do have a short clip of that process from court that we can replay for you right now.
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Gonsalves, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Now, when those names were read aloud, in each one of those victims admitting the guilt and the crime committed there, while the defendant, Bryan Kohberger, remained very stoic and professional in the courtroom while addressing the judge, our downtown Boise neighborhood reporter, Riley Shoemaker, who's inside the courtroom, was sending me updates and telling me that she was seeing many tears from the family members inside the courtroom during that process that we just watched again. Now, we'll go over again briefly the prosecution's evidence in this case. But first, I'm wondering if we can get a live shot out there at the Ada County Courthouse, where we are expecting the family members to start making their way out of the courthouse. Our senior reporter, Don Nelson, has been standing by all afternoon and listening in live to these proceedings with us as well. So if we can get Don Nelson joining us live to get his take on what is going on there and what kind of the biggest points that stood out to you. Don, how's it going out there at the courthouse?
Well, Steve Gonzalez crossed over the street. He protested what was happening today, this plea deal, by staying with his lawyer and some other friends across the street. Don't know exactly where he was, but he crossed the street, came to the front of the Ada County Courthouse where the rest of the Gonzalez's family came out. He hugged him, kissed him again, and now they're over on the other side. Not quite sure. There's a large podium of sorts, a makeshift podium of probably 25 microphones waiting for other family members to come out. Defense, prosecutors, I don't know if they're going to speak or not, but it looks like the Gonzalez family has moved a block that way. So I think what we're going to try to do, Karen, is head down that way to try to see if we can find out what they're saying.
All right. Thank you, Don, being live out there at the courthouse for us. As soon as we start seeing those family members arrive at the podium, we will bring that to you live here as well. It's important to note that today seems like it may be the last time that we see Bryan Kohberger in court wearing a suit and tie. That was an agreement made early on in the process as the defendants in the case are offered that innocence until proven guilty. There is an agreement often made that allows these defendants to wear what we call civilian clothing, real people clothing instead of jailhouse attire. The judge says that is no more. Now that you have admitted guilt, you no longer have that right to be perceived as innocent. So when we see him at that sentencing hearing coming up later this month, we do expect to see him in probably an orange jumpsuit, as he is going to be spending his time at the Ada County Jail up until that sentencing is done, in which case we will expect him to be transported and moved to the Idaho Department of Correction. Now, our reporter Riley Shoemaker, who's been inside the courtroom, also shared a bit of the process of what it is like to get into the courtroom for this. If we have some video, we can show you of what it was like early this morning. We had people showing up while it was still dark outside, lining up outside the courthouse, setting up to get their camera set up over there. We can listen in. It sounds like Don is catching up with Steve Gonzalez.
By the FBI agents, and he just let it slip through his fingers.
Was there anything he said that surprised you?
No, not really.
All right, thanks, Steve.
Have a good one, bud.
Yeah, thank you.
How good are you guys going to be next year?
So a very quick interaction there. Steve Gonzalez and the entire family there of Kaylee Gonzalez, one of the victims killed in this case. Upset and disappointed. They were one of the ones very outspoken against this plea deal, wanting this to go to trial. And the opening statements from the judge in this case at this hearing today actually was in reference to some of the comments made by the Gonzalez family. He opened up this hearing by mentioning that they have been being contacted by many people at the courthouse, the judge and his staff, because there was that call out to put off this hearing, to deny this plea agreement, which the judge had a right to do, could have done, but did not feel that was the right thing to do in this case. Now, he started off by saying that he's not even going to be listening to those voicemails and that they've been forwarded to security and law enforcement. Riley Shoemaker, who's been inside the courtroom and the courthouse today, said that she saw many officers there in full tactical gear. And again, that's part of this jail transport process to get the defendant, Bryan Kohberger, back and forth from the courtroom and to the jail. There is a lot of security that goes into that. We're going to head back out live and check back in with Don Nelson. Don, we heard a very quick interaction with Steve Gonzalez out there. What was he telling you and sharing with you out there?
Well, you know, it's interesting, Karen, because as I mentioned, there's 25 plus microphones here. I've mentioned that this media presence truly shows and reflects the national attention for this case. Let's bring in Riley Shoemaker, who just left the courtroom. We're live. Riley, come on in.
Hey, Don.
Okay, tell us about inside that courtroom. What was it like to hear Bryan Kohberger admit guilt to these 4 plus 5, so 5 total counts?
So it was 5 total counts, 4 counts of murder. They read out each name, and we heard him speak. He said yes, and he had to agree to, knowing the charges, knowing exactly what it was he was pleading guilty to. And I think the room really went still when they said to him, are you saying that you are guilty because you are guilty? So that was a big moment in the courtroom. I was seated right behind his parents. It was an emotional moment, I think, for all family involved.
So Bryan Kohberger's parents did travel from Pennsylvania to be here today?
Yes. I wasn't quite sure if that was them from behind, but as prosecutors were making their statements of evidence, they did point to the couple in front of me and say that that was his parents, that they had done the trash pull from, and that they had found the DNA in that trash pull that connected Bryan Kohberger to that knife sheath. They also noted that DNA on that knife sheath was a single source.
Having seen Bryan Kohberger in court, you have many times, he's very stoic, doesn't really show much emotion. What about his parents when the prosecutor, Latah County prosecutor, was going through the case that he would have presented?
I was not able to see the front of their faces, but they were comforting each other. They were sort of holding on to each other. It looked like his mother was using some sort of listening device so she could hear better. But they did show that they were emotional in some sort of way about the situation. He remained stoic, as he typically does. No indication of any sort of feelings one way or another. What
about the other family members of the victims?
They seemed pretty distraught. There were a lot of tears from different family members. Kaylee Gonzalez's mother appeared to be just sick over it, but it was a very emotional, showing from that side of the room for sure.
Judge Hippler laying down the law when he first started talking about the emails and the phone calls that his office has received. He says he didn't pay any attention to that, so we can only assume that there were a lot of people that contacted their office about this plea deal. Fair to say?
Oh, yeah. We did see that the Gonzalez family on social media had been calling for people to reach out to Steve Hippler directly. And so he said that the court staff was overwhelmed with the amount of messages, voicemails, letters, emails. And he said, this isn't fair to the other cases that are being tried. This is not the only trial that we're having in the Ada County courthouse right now. And it's also not up to him to make a call of a plea deal. He only, decides whether or not to accept it. So, it was, he put his foot down. He was not having it with that situation.
You followed this case so closely. Was there anything that the Latah County prosecutor, when he laid out his case, which I think is interesting, and Karen and I were going to talk about this when we had a couple of minutes, and then we saw Mr. Gonzalez going across the street, that basically a 8 to 10 week trial, possibly, he laid out in about 12 minutes.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that play out. And obviously there's so much more nuance to all of that. And that, witness testimony would have provided more color to that timeline. But a lot of it was stuff we had heard before, locations of the car, pinging, the towers and tracking his location when he was in and out of the area. They noted that he parked his car above the house and he made his way down to the house and came in through the sliding door at the kitchen.
Yeah, it was very chilling testimony. Just to hear him recite this presentation he made, it was very chilling. I thought one thing was very interesting I wanted to bring up was when he was talking about changing, he contacted DMV to replace the plates from Washington to Pennsylvania. And having lived in Pennsylvania, I know that you don't have to have a license plate on the front of the vehicle, and all the video showed the car with the plates. I thought that was very interesting.
I totally took note of that as well, as someone who has also lived in Pennsylvania, and I always took note of the fact that on a car in Pennsylvania there's no license plate on that front. And so that was maybe going to be an identifying factor of his car, would have been that there was no license plate on the front, because that's what they had in the photos. So I think the idea was to go swap those out, and maybe that would count out his car if there was indeed a license plate on the front. So I thought that one was interesting as well.
Do you have any insight or indication who will will come to this makeshift podium in front of the Ada County Courthouse?
So as of right now, what we have confirmed is that the Laramies, so Madison Mogen's mother and stepfather, will be making a statement today. We heard that from their attorney. We will not likely be hearing from the family of Ethan Chapin today. I spoke with someone close to the family who said that they will likely be releasing a statement maybe sometime tomorrow. As for the Kernodles, I'm not quite sure either if we'll be hearing from them. It sounds like you saw the Gonzalez's head out, so I'm not sure that we'll be hearing from them in this state right here, but I'm sure we will be hearing from them at some point.
I know you can't hear Karen, back in the studio with our team coverage. Is there anything specifically you would like to ask Riley or talk to her about?
We will certainly be.
Because I know you've got some things to do.
Yes, we will check back in with you guys as soon as we start seeing people arriving there at that podium. But for now, we're going to just recap very quickly. Obviously, before today, Kohberger's attorneys and entire defense team worked for almost 2.5 years to prove their client's innocence to avoid the death penalty. Kohberger waived his right to a speedy trial long ago. His team successfully argued for a change of venue. The Idaho Supreme Court agreed to move this very high-profile case and the pre-trial hearings from Latah County in North Idaho, a pretty small courthouse, to down here in downtown Boise, the Ada County Courthouse. That was all over concerns of media coverage and possible bias in any jury that might have come from that tight-knit small college community. A strict gag order was put into place, which we learned today will remain in place until that sentencing hearing later this month. So we do not expect to hear from the lawyers in this case as they make their way out of the courthouse building. Now, this prevented a lot of people, like the investigators and lawyers, from speaking to the media. And many of the court documents in this case, including much of the evidence, has been sealed. Kohberger's team repeatedly attempted to get the death penalty off the table, even citing his autism diagnosis, but to no avail. Judge Stephen Hippler denied every single one of those motions leading up to today. Now, in recent months, efforts to further delay the trial also fell flat. The defense unsuccessfully argued they needed more time to go through all of the evidence in this case, and they were unable to introduce an official alibi or suggest alternate perpetrators, which is something they had requested to discuss in front of the judge just in the last couple of weeks. Then on Monday, an announcement of this plea deal that caught many people by surprise, including Judge Stephen Hippler himself, as we just learned. Now, former Idaho State Attorney General David Leroy offered some of the context to us earlier this week leading up to this deal.
Well, both sides are giving up something. Certainly the prosecution was well founded in its desire to make this a death penalty case under the horrendous and extraordinarily grievous situation that Mr. Kohberger apparently now admits that he created in killing these 4 young people tragically and dreadfully. A final resolution is a good resolution in this case, even though it may leave some people slightly unsatisfied or greatly unsatisfied.
Now, according to Leroy, I spoke with him over the phone, and he told me that Idaho does have very strong victims' rights laws, which requires prosecutors to involve the family in some way when plea deal conversations like this are up for consideration. So giving them the right to be informed and involved in some way, but they do not have the power to veto any agreement. So as we've seen, it sounds like they were notified via email over the weekend, Sunday afternoon, and told about these kind of closed-door conversations that had been going on and the agreement that was being made. But the judge obviously is the one who makes that final decision. And they were trying to ask Judge Hippler to deny this agreement. But as we've heard today, it was accepted, and he will face sentencing for these heinous crimes that he has now admitted guilt to that happened on November 13th of 2022. Now, we are going to walk you through what the prosecution covered in court today. They outlined very quickly in a couple of minutes all of the evidence that they plan to present in this case that they say points to Bryan Kohberger as being the person who did commit this crime which he has now admitted to. So what they say started this all was Amazon search history for a K-bar knife and a knife sheath that he purchased with a gift card online. He then moved to Washington State. He was in a PhD program for criminal justice. We know that beginning a couple months before the murders, around July 9th, his cell phone, Bryan Kohberger's cell phone, pinged off the cell tower near the King Road home where these murders took place. Between then and several months later, when the crimes happened, they say his phone pinged that tower 23 times. They did clearly say they do not have evidence that he had direct contact with the home or the people who lived in it. And what you're looking at now is our first chance to see those high quality photos taken from within the courtroom today, which is something that's very different than anything we've seen from the previous hearings, where the only media access has been being present in person or watching the stream online just like the public. They did approve of one still photographer being inside that room today, and this is our first look at those images. You can see Bryan Kohberger here with a button-down shirt and a tie. Looks like a recent haircut, the moment that he was sworn under oath. And this is going to be the last image that we've shown you from inside the courtroom, but we have just gotten these into our newsroom and our first chance to see those images as well. Now, as for the night of the murders as laid out by the prosecution today, they said on November 13th, Bryan Kohberger left his apartment and turned off his phone. This was the early morning hours of November 13th. They say that he was driving in the area of he left his campus, Pullman, turned off that phone, and then surveillance footage, which if you saw the Dateline episode, the 2-hour special that created even more convolution in this case and efforts to delay the trial because of the evidence leaked in there, you saw those images of that car circling and circling and circling that King Road residence beginning at 3:30 a.m. They say once he parked and went inside that house, he went straight up to the 3rd floor, which is where we know Madison Mogen and Kaylee Gonsalves, best friends since 6th grade, were sleeping in a bed together. They say Bryan Kohberger went straight into that bedroom, Madison Mogen's bedroom, and killed both Kaylee and Madison. That is where the knife sheath was discovered at the crime scene, in that bed next to Madison Mogen's body. There was a single male's DNA on that knife sheath, which we now know matches the DNA of Bryan Kohberger. When he left that room and went downstairs, prosecutors say Xana was still awake. This was after 4 a.m., around 4:20 in the morning when this car was seen leaving the scene. She was still awake and had recently ordered food on DoorDash. She was on the 2nd floor of this 3-story house. And in some way, for some reason, Bryan Kohberger crossed paths with Xana Kernodle and killed her. Her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, was asleep in her bedroom. Prosecutors say Bryan Kohberger then entered that bedroom and killed Ethan Chapin. Each victim had multiple stab wounds, but they did make a point to say there was no sexual activity involving any of the victims and the defendant. We then know that a surviving roommate saw a masked man walk past her bedroom and out the sliding glass door on the main floor of the home on that 2nd floor. That was about 4:20 a.m. when prosecutor Bill Thompson referenced that video of that car speeding away from the home at a high rate of speed, where he says even almost lost control. That was 4:20 in the morning. They say surveillance video then shows his Hyundai Elantra with Kohberger driving it through a variety of back roads and secluded areas, which they say was likely on purpose to avoid those high traffic areas and the quick commute that could have taken him shortly and quickly back to Pullman. Now, they went through a variety of back roads, and his phone was not turned back on until about 4:48 a.m. south of town. And then we know he went back to the area of the house later that morning, around 9 o'clock in the morning. And then that image that we have all seen since then, they say around 9:30 a.m., he went back to his apartment near Washington State University and took a selfie of himself in the bathroom, giving a thumbs up at 9:30 in the morning. Now, we do want to, of course, remember the victims in this case. You can see them all there on your screen. They meant a lot more to these family members than just being known as the victims of this murder. We are going to dive deeper into each one of these college students and obviously have much more for you later in our newscast today. But for now, we do want to check in live with our senior reporter, Roland Barris, who is in Moscow, where a healing garden has been made to honor these victims. Roland, what are you hearing from people up there as they receive this news in real time, just like us?
Well, as you might imagine, Karen, like any university right now, it's summertime. There aren't many people here. It's very quiet. We've only seen one woman come through who was in tears. She had been listening to the broadcast and was walking around the healing garden here before moving off. And obviously, this community has been deeply affected by it. That's why they built this here in part and built it so quickly. People really realize this is a hugely important thing. But also, they don't have that closeness in most cases that the family does to this case. And so as we talk to people in the community, and I had a chance to do that, there's a lot of feeling, I think, that they're looking to move forward. And let's listen to what a couple of people said.
When I first saw it, the headlines read, that people were upset. But when I read the article about it, I thought it's kind of nice not to have to go through the trial. I think if it was my kids, it would be so emotional and difficult. And it sounds like he is going to be in there for life and there's no way out. And honestly, sometimes I look at the death penalty as an easy escape. And I would think life in prison sometimes would be harder. So I kind of looked at it that way. I think I'm not the parent, but I would be happy with that.
I definitely feel it's unfair. I think the death penalty is a very usable, it should be used penalty for killing people, just given my views, my lifestyle. So I think it's just unfair to the families. It allows him to hide. He never had to really go to trial. He never had to, answer to his, he is answering to his crimes, but not to the fullest extent, in my opinion. So
I'm a little disappointed that the families won't be able to get closure, to hear, maybe more of why it happened and how it happened. But at the same time, I'm glad that he's admitting his guilt right now, finally. I think that the death penalty, while that's, the extreme that people were hoping for, I think that death would have been an easy way out for him. Like, he should suffer in prison for a very long time. So yeah, I guess you can't say you're happy about any of this, but I'm glad that he admitted that he did it.
So just a few different perspectives there from people who are not obviously as closely tied to this case as family members, but different perspectives abound about this case here in Moscow and all over the state and all over the country, really. This has garnered, international attention. But most of the people that I did talk to here say that they are somewhat relieved that the case is over. One gentleman, though, that I did talk to said, look, there's a lot of information that he felt, would have come out during court and would have been good for the general public as well as the families to understand about what went on, so that you don't see the proliferation of things like conspiracy theories, that someone else was involved. And I think that the prosecution prosecution, laying out a lot of the facts that they were going to present, maybe went some distance towards appeasing people of that thought process there, that, talking about single source DNA that was found on the knife sheath. That means from one person only, and connected to the suspect. That was one issue that he was concerned about, the DNA evidence. Now, in a court case, would that have been challenged? And that's what court is all about, is challenging it, seeing both sides of the story, and maybe set some people's minds at ease a little bit more. When you hear the prosecutor say it, it sounds like an open and shut case, but obviously there's always two sides to a story. And I think there are still some people who will think, that maybe they didn't see enough of the evidence and would have liked to have seen this gone to court and gone through the process. But clearly, they're just going to have to accept it as it is at this point. And here we are at the Healing Center here today, and it's obviously not school year time. It's very quiet on campus here, but we expect that there will probably be more people coming here and needing this sort of healing garden following this closure of the case. So for now, Karen, reporting from Moscow, I'm senior reporter Roland Barris. We'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Roland, for that live report from that healing garden in Moscow. It is interesting to discuss that one single source DNA on the knife sheath. A lot of the evidence in this case, for those who've been following it closely, know a lot of the things that were going to be presented as evidence could be considered circumstantial. But the DNA found on the knife sheath is what a lot of people described as the kind of nail in the coffin for the prosecution's case. It's hard to explain that away. And the prosecution touched on that as well today as they were presenting what would have been their case to the judge. They said after the crimes were committed on November 13th, within about a week or so of that, Bryan Kohberger was once again searching online for a K-bar knife sheath. They say he was then also trying to delete or alter that search history for some reason. Their theory is that he knew he left that knife sheath behind and wanted to replace it should someone come looking for him or questioning him. They also say that later that week, he went to the DMV, as we heard, to change his Hyundai Elantra license plates from Pennsylvania plates to Washington plates. As Riley mentioned, from experience living in Pennsylvania, she said you don't need a front license plate in Pennsylvania. And knowing the car was seen on surveillance, it was only a few weeks after that that we started seeing those pictures of the vehicle associated with the crime posted all over. Moscow Police Department was very outspoken, asking people for tips and evidence coming forward about whose car is this? Do you know who this is? They think it's connected to the case. And at the same time, we now know that Bryan Kohberger was trying to switch how his car would appear on those images by adding Washington license plates that would put an identifying license plate on the front of his car and make it look different than the car seen in those surveillance footages. We also know that he had that pre-planned trip back home over winter break to spend time in Pennsylvania with his family. As we reported at the time, he was actually even pulled over during that trek with his father and questioned by police. So once again was seen on camera by police in that Hyundai Elantra. We know also the details of investigative genetic genealogy that was used in this case, which basically means the DNA that they pulled from that trash can that we heard explained again in court today was a Q-tip from the family's trash can that happened to have the DNA that they matched to the father of whoever's DNA was found on that knife sheath at the crime scene. That is what allowed them to issue an arrest warrant and a search warrant for that Pennsylvania home where he was taken into custody in the middle of a night, where a DNA sample was then taken from the suspect himself, which they confirmed did match the DNA found on that knife sheath in the bed of Madison Mogen right next to her body. Now, that car was seized in Pennsylvania and thoroughly examined, but as we heard today, prosecutors say that car was almost meticulously cleaned inside, basically torn apart. And they say because of his knowledge in the PhD program studying criminal justice, he knows what evidence crime scene investigators would be looking for. He knew where they would be looking. So they said they even found cleaner there in his car, and it was meticulously cleaned inside and out. So they do think that was part of his plan, knowing what to look for and how to clear it out. Now, as for what's next in this case, the defense and state agreed to waive pretrial investigations. The prosecution does want to make sure that the victims' families are given an opportunity to speak. Now, we weren't sure if we would be hearing more from the lawyers in this case today outside of the courthouse, but because they are going to keep that non-dissemination order in place until sentencing, which has officially been set for July 13th, we don't expect to hear any more from the lawyers in a formal capacity. The family members are allowed to speak. We are still watching closely by outside the courthouse, and if we see any of those family members approaching the podium, we will bring that to you live. But as for what's next, we know that we will be seeing a full day at the Ada County Courthouse to formally sentence Bryan Kohberger to these 4 consecutive life sentences with additional 10 years for that burglary charge. We know that the victims and all of the family members will be given an opportunity to speak and directly address Bryan Kohberger in that courtroom on July 23rd. What we don't know yet is whether Bryan Kohberger himself will speak. I know a lot of people in this case are hoping, including the Gonsalves family, are hoping to learn why this happened. He has already admitted now that he did it. What they want to know now is why. I've seen that question many, many times circulating in groups online related to this case. They also want to know where that murder weapon was stashed. As we heard today, confirmation that it to this day has never been located. So as for right now, let's take a live look back outside of the Ada County Courthouse, where we know there is at least a very large media presence. We have seen media flying in from all over the country, and we have all of their microphones lined up here at the podium, wondering if any family members will be speaking publicly. But we do have our downtown Boise neighborhood reporter, Riley Shoemaker, standing by live. She has been covering this case very closely as well. So Riley, what was your biggest takeaway from the latest that we saw inside that courtroom today or outside the courthouse?
Well, Karen, you know, a lot of conversations were had as we waited in line to get into that courtroom. People were lined up here before 5 a.m. I joined that line around 5 a.m. and, you know, a lot of chatter amongst both the public and reporters who have been covering this since the very beginning. I spoke with one couple. Their daughter was at the University of Idaho at the time of the murder, so they've been really following this closely. But even more so, you know, one member of that couple, the wife, she told me that she had a similar experience that she went through where her father was murdered, and that murderer took a plea deal, and she said she never really got a sense of closure. So that was insight into maybe how some of these families might be feeling today as Bryan Kohberger accepts this plea deal. I did learn that there are whispers that the Chapin, or excuse me, that the Chapin family, yes, will be making an official statement, but that the Laramies will be making their way out. And that's the family of Madison Mogan, her mother and her stepfather. I've been texting with their attorney, the family's attorney, and he told me that they're going to be making their way out in front of the courthouse to officially make a statement. We have not heard from them yet officially on how they feel about this plea deal, but I'm hearing that they may be in support of it. That, of course, is speculation, so we're not quite sure exactly how they may be feeling coming out of the court proceedings, but it was a really heavy day in there. There were multiple rows filled with families of the victims. Of course, you know, with this particular case, there being 4 victims and many family members that showed up for them. So, another unique thing about today, though, is that we did see Bryan Kohberger's parents, as I mentioned earlier. They made their way out from Pennsylvania. We have not seen them yet, and they, seem to be emotional, comforting each other, especially as, specific references were made to them in their home in Pennsylvania. We did get a statement from them last night that they are asking for privacy at this time, so it doesn't sound like we'll be getting any more further statements from them. And, we have 3 weeks until this sentencing, and that's when we'll hear those victim statements, from family members. I'm not sure if we'll hear from any of the surviving roommates, but I'm just going to take a look behind me and see if there's any commotion going on. Again, we're waiting for the family of Madison Mogen to come out. So we see some sheriff's deputies. So I think, Karen, we're going to take it over to whatever is happening there as we wait for the family to take the podium.
Now, Riley, just really quickly, while we have this live shot up and we are waiting for them to approach the podium, tell me about the security presence that you've seen out there at the courthouse. You and I, we've been down there. We've covered some of these cases before. Has anything stood out to be different to you, or anything that you've seen that was unusual as far as normal court proceedings?
Karen, in other hearings that we've been to together here at the courthouse, there's maybe 1 to 2 bailiffs per courtroom, and the presence of officers throughout the courthouse. But this is definitely something different. There were officers with Boise Police and Ada County Sheriff's Office out front with dogs this morning, really sweeping the area, keeping it safe and secure. I mentioned this while we were waiting for Kohberger and Judge Hippler to come in to the courthouse, or into the courtroom rather, that you could see in those back hallways that there were people in sort of tactical gear that they used, presumably when they transported Kohberger here to the courthouse. If you can see right now on this courthouse shot that there are multiple officers standing up at the entrance. It's definitely not the best day to have to come pay a parking ticket or, file a small civil suit. It's quite different than a normal day at the Ada County Courthouse. I even myself, having been here many times, I typically bring in a coffee, a water. I had to toss, my coffee tumbler and my water bottle in the garbage on my way in. So there was no extra frills. You could have your laptop in the room. Phones were kept, they had to stay low and horizontal. They were really keeping an eye on that and watching, the stands like hawks, keeping an eye on what people were up to on their computers. Security was really, a top priority.
Now, Riley, talk us through what time you arrived at the courthouse today, because I know there were already dozens of people lining up early in the morning. Talk us through the process, because they did not yet have that lottery system in place that they were expecting for courtroom seating. So it was a first come, first served basis, and there were a lot of people there this morning. How did that shake out?
Yeah, so they didn't have any official sort of system in place, and so what ended up happening was it became a makeshift sign-up sheet. A producer with ABC pulled out a yellow notepad. We wrote down our names. We had spots. We were waiting to get into the courtroom and standing outside the courthouse, and once they let us in around 8 a.m. when the courthouse opened, that was when we all went up to the 4th floor where the courtroom was for this hearing. And it basically was like we were starting from scratch. They were not allowing us to sort of go based on what was on that notepad. We had to single file get in line where we were standing, and luckily I was able to maintain the spot that I had in line. I don't believe many people after me did get in, and I got here around 5:15 this morning. Now, I will say a lot of the people who were here earlier in the morning were some of these national news folks who had, early morning shows that they were reporting for, but there were definitely members of the public. But you could definitely see in that line that we were on the 4th floor, that end of the line, sort of maybe the 20 or so folks that didn't make it into the room, those looked to me like they were more members of the public coming for various reasons.
Okay, it sounds like a big crowd out there, and we can see the folks behind you still waiting and anticipating to hear from the family members of Madison Mogen. We will continue to monitor that live, of course, and if they do make it out here in the next couple of minutes, we will bring that to you. Okay. Now, of course, this case It spans almost 2.5 years now. There have been a lot of updates and changes in this case. We do have an extensive timeline for you. If you want to recap your knowledge on the case or refresh your memory on some of that evidence, you can view that right now on idahonews6.com. It's on our website. You can also check it out on your app, on your cell phone right now while we're waiting to hear from people outside of the courthouse. Now, as for this hearing today, we talked about this catching some people off guard, including the family members of the victims who said that they were shocked on Sunday to be notified via email that this agreement was underway and that they had reached these terms without their approval. Now, as we mentioned and talked about extensively, unfortunately for these victims' families, they do not have the final say. There are strong victims' rights laws in Idaho that allows them to be notified before the public and before the media, but they do not have veto power. It is ultimately up to the judge to accept the agreement that was already made behind closed doors between Bryan Kohberger's defense team and the state's prosecution team, which we know was happening late last week and through the weekend, with Judge Stephen Hippler just being notified about it on Monday. Now, this was a surprise to us as well to learn about on Monday, because it was just last Thursday that we reported about the change in date for opening arguments. So the judge clarified that in court today, saying they have been full steam ahead getting ready for this extensive trial. A death penalty case often takes months, with that additional penalty phase after and if a conviction is made. So this was going to be months of work. And remember, this entire case moved from Latah County. So you're also talking about travel and participation from lawyers involved in the case and all of those investigators. So we do want to check back in live. We think that we are seeing some media, or some of the family members approaching the media here. Riley, what's going on?
Yeah, we have the family of Madison Mogan making their way to the podium right now. We do have a camera over there that's going to listen in on what they're saying. You're making...
Good afternoon. I'm Leander James from the law firm of James, Vernon and Weeks in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'm a victims' rights attorney. For the past 2 years, I've had the privilege and the honor to provide pro bono representation in this criminal case for Karen Laramie and Scott Laramie, the loving mother and stepfather of Maddie Mogan. I will be reading a statement of gratitude today from the Laramies. 962 days ago, we lost our Maddie, our kind, loving, vivacious, and caring daughter full of purpose and promise. We are grateful for the gift of her life, and we have grieved the loss of that life during each of these 962 days. We love you, Maddie, and we miss you. We are grateful for the gift of the young, vivacious, promising lives of Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan. And we deeply, deeply mourn their senseless loss. We remain in solidarity with their families and friends, and we continue to shower them with our prayers and support. We are grateful for their prayers, love, and support that they have given us. They have helped us and sustained us during our darkest times. We are grateful to the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, and his dedicated and caring team, including victim coordinators, Kim and Stacy, who have helped to guide us through the sometimes confusing and disorienting legal process. Thank you for all your dedicated, diligent, and tireless commitment to justice and the successful outcome reached today. We support the plea agreement 100%. While we know there are some who do not support it, we ask that they respect our belief that this is the best outcome possible for the victims, their families, and the state of Idaho. We extend our deep gratitude to the many law enforcement officers and staff who worked tirelessly to obtain the critical evidence that brought justice today. including the Moscow Police Department, the FBI, the Idaho State Patrol, and the Lehigh County Sheriff's Department. We are deeply grateful to Judge Hippler and Judge John Judge before him. We thank you for your diligence, thoughtfulness, and judicial guidance. We appreciate the difficult work you have done to balance the rights of all involved and to uphold the rule of law. You have had our prayers and support throughout this case. We send our love and gratitude to the many family and friends who have supported us, cared for us, and helped us to heal our open emotional wounds. To the good people of North Idaho, who have showered us with kindness and support, we thank you. We also mourn today with you the recent tragic and senseless loss of two brave North Idaho firefighters. We extend our prayers and support to their families. You are not alone. We understand your pain. For all parents who have endured the loss of a child, we know recovery is a long and at times an almost unbearable journey. But you are not alone. And there is hope and there is healing. We thank those in the press who have respected our privacy and the grieving process, and the privacy and grieving process of the families of Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan. To others in the press, we gently encourage you to do the same. We thank the many people across our nation and beyond who have reached out to us, prayed for us, and extended their kindness. You too have helped us on our journey to heal. We now embark on a new path. We turn from tragedy and mourning. We turn from darkness and uncertainty of the legal process to the light of the future. We have closure. We embark on a path of hope and healing. We invite all of those who have mourned with us to join us, and we wish you well. Thank you. I will now share a few words of my own. Over the past 2 years, I've been amazed and humbled by Karen and Scott's strength, endurance, and faith. They have uplifted me and so many. They founded a nonprofit to help others in the name of Maddie. They have been a beacon of hope amidst a dark and tragic time. To those young and bright attorneys out there looking for purpose and meaning in your profession, I invite you to join the effort of crime victim attorneys to bring victims justice with compassion, empathy, humility, and understanding. This case is not the end of violence. This case is not the end of lawlessness. We need your help to bring hope and healing to the innocent caught in the crossfire of life. Thank you all.
Sir, could you just say your name one more time, sir?
Leander James, Leander, last name is James. Thank you.
All right, now that was, again, Leander James, the victim's rights attorney representing Karen and Scott Laramie, the mother and stepfather, a victim in this case, Madison Mogan. We have seen Madison's mom attending these hearings in the past here at the Ada County Courthouse. Riley, any takeaways from the statements they just shared?
You know, Karen, as we had said just a few minutes ago, we had predicted that them supporting a plea deal was a possibility. And it seems like, you know, more and more of what I'm hearing is that these families are in support of putting this behind them. Leander James, I'm told, was a very close, support system for the family during this time. And so to hear him share their words, I think that was, a big moment for them. They also called out, their thanks and gratitude to Judge Stephen Hippler, who, has, I think, really been a staunch, supporter of going by the law, having a fair trial, doing this right, everything in the spirit of fairness. So, it seems like they really wanted to just put a bow on this time, put it behind them. And they also called out, the 2 lives lost in Kootenai County over the weekend, those 2 firefighters saying, "We feel your pain." And so they're really standing together with all those who have suffered loss and grief in their lives.
Certainly no easy way to deal with the loss of a child. Thank you so much, Riley, for your live reporting outside the Ada County Courthouse. We're going to return you to your regularly scheduled program here over the air on Idaho News 6. But of course, be sure to tune back in here tonight at 5 o'clock. We will have our team coverage and continuing coverage on this high-profile case and the major development today as defendant Bryan Kohberger officially pleads guilty to all charges against him. You can also recap and learn much more about this case online right now. Just head on over to IdahoNews6.com, and we'll see you at 5 o'clock.